Every victim leaves a trace. Every trace tells a story. And every story brings us closer to the truth.
On Sunday, July 27, 2025, a 911 call goes out from a car heading toward Holbrook.
My daughter, she's with us. We live out in the desert, and we're calling the Holbrook to the EMS station. She ran away for the third time in a week in the desert, and when the neighbor found her in the wash, she was unresponsive completely. She ran away. This is like the third time now, and she still hasn't even really bounced back from the first time. But when the neighbor found her, said that she was just almost gasping. By the time she got back to the house, she was barely breathing, so I'm breathing for her now. She's unresponsive, unconscious, unable to breathe for herself.
Have you got her to the flat ground, solid ground?
Yeah, she's in the car.
Okay, I need you to put
You're
her,
gonna walk
put her
outside.
on the ground.
On the rocks?
I need her on a flat ground so that you can administer CPR. Do you know how to
On the
administer CPR?
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I hear the EMS coming.
Wanting to start CPR, or are you waiting for EMS?
I'm waiting for them because I'm trying to get her breath. Not doing this on the rock.
The 10-year-old in the back seat isn't breathing. Dispatch orders the driver to pull over. A patrol car finds the vehicle on the shoulder, doors flung wide to the heat, and for a moment the highway becomes a room. Hands counting compressions, a medic's steady voice, the hiss of an oxygen bag. They say she'd run, that a neighbor found her, and they were driving for help. First responders rush her from the roadside to Winslow, then onto Phoenix Children's.
We didn't know where else to take her. Let's just go like smack down right to the That's it. All right. And she's been running away for the last 3 or 4 weeks since we've been here.
Okay.
She ran away this morning. We went out and tried to find her, and our neighbor found her.
What time this morning?
We got up about 9:30, so it would have been close to 10:30.
So you guys saw her the night before?
Yeah.
Okay.
We all sleep in the same building.
Okay. And then, so you said she ran around that morning, and you guys were trying to find her?
This morning.
Yeah.
This morning, yeah.
And you guys went out trying to find her, and then your neighbors found her?
Neighbor found her, yeah.
Okay, what were they doing down there? How'd they find her?
They were on quads.
They were on their quads? Okay. And then they brought her to you?
Yeah.
At your house?
Yeah. Well, it's technically was my great uncle's. He died recently, so we moved in there.
The next 3 days are all motion. Wheels, hallways, fluorescent lights that don't blink, until Wednesday, July 30th, when the movement stops. What remains is the quiet space she leaves behind and a town trying to understand how a child can arrive on a sun-bleached shoulder and never make it home. Her name was Rebekah Baptiste. In the final weeks of her life, she lived off the grid, far from neighbors, schools, and the routines that keep children visible. But Rebekah was not invisible. For years, people had asked questions, agencies had knocked, papers were filed, warnings were raised, and raised again. How does a child become this unseen? Before this became a case file, she was a kid with a bright smile, 10 years old, too small for some of her clothes, growing into others. The adults around her called her Rebekah, sometimes Becca. There aren't enough verified details about her hobbies to spin myths, and we won't. What we do know is simpler and heavier. She was a child who should have been safe, who kept showing up in the sightlines of adults, teachers, neighbors, state workers, who tried in different ways to pull her into focus. That's who she was, present, and asking quietly to be seen. There had been earlier flashes of desperation. Once, Rebekah jumped from a second-story apartment window and ran, first to a homeless person for help, then to a quick trip. It reads like a child's one-person alarm. Something is wrong. Please see me. Before the move to northeastern Arizona, the family was living in Phoenix, Several sources say Rebekah's dad had regained custody of her and two siblings after all the children had spent time in foster care. In early July 2025, they left Phoenix and drove northeast to a remote spot near Concho in Apache County, a canvas-walled yurt with limited power and water, far from paved roads. When deputies later asked why, he said he came to care for family property after a great-uncle's death. He mentioned his father planned to move there as well, though that man had been arrested on July 6th in an unrelated case. When they reached Apache County, the yurt wasn't just remote, it was rough. No electricity, no running water. Inside, the floor was strewn with trash and animal feces, a space more temporary than home. The sleeping plan said a lot. The two younger boys on a shared air mattress, Rebekah on a thin pad on the floor. One of Richard's brothers told investigators that she slept there because she was in trouble, a punishment that lasted through the night. Richard Daniel Baptiste was 32. His partner, Anisha Ania Woods, 29. In the records, their names sit beside pages of medical notes. Investigators wrote that as clinicians worked to keep Rebekah alive, Richard showed little visible concern. In his interview, he said he used a belt for discipline. Too hard, he conceded, and tried to frame the bruises as falls or barbed wire. He acknowledged drinking and marijuana. The clinicians who saw Rebekah's body said the pattern of injuries didn't read like accidents. About the past, Richard offered his own explanation. He and the children's biological mother split years ago because of her drug use. That last part is his account to deputies, not a court finding. According to an interview with investigators, Woods met Baptiste while they were working at a Phoenix call center. They had been together for about 4 years. By the time Rebekah died, both caregivers had been charged, not only in her murder, but also with child abuse counts involving her two younger brothers. One place kept seeing Rebekah: school. At Empower College Prep in Phoenix, staff noticed patterns, absences, disclosures, visible concerns, and they made calls. More than once. By the school's count, a dozen or more times over roughly 2 years. The state's tally is lower. They say 5 calls matched their intake records and 1 met criteria to investigate. A school resource officer conducted a home visit and filed a report. Relatives, according to the state's accounting, had no recorded calls after 2019. At school, the children found words for what discipline looked like at home. They told teachers Rebekah was forced to run laps, to hold planks until her body shook. Punishment dressed up as exercise, assigned by both her father and his partner. According to sworn testimony, one brother arrived missing a toenail and said he was being beaten. The reports stacked up. The routine never seemed to change. The timeline starts at the beginning. Arizona DCS contacts go back to 2015 when Rebekah was an infant and continue across different addresses and years. Over that span, allegations ranged from neglect to physical abuse, with later reports specifically naming the father's girlfriend. At the time of the final 911 call, an open case alleging physical abuse linked to reports of spanking by Woods was still active. What did doctors and detectives actually see? Testimony and reports describe a child malnourished and severely dehydrated, black and blue from head to toe in different stages of healing, with brain bleeding and swelling so severe she was declared brain dead. A case agent testified she had been too dehydrated to walk on her own. There were clumps of hair missing and burn-like marks, possible cigarette burns, on her back. Several toenails were damaged or missing. One brother was also described as missing a toenail. In court, the state's witness relayed the forensic doctor's findings. Injuries to the vaginal and anal areas, and a pattern consistent with child sexual abuse and torture. The scene around the yurt echoed those injuries. In a nearby building at the residence, investigators found a bathroom spattered with blood and a hairbrush packed with large clumps of blonde hair. Rebekah was blonde, and she was missing clumps of hair when medics saw her. These are the details the public record carries. What happened inside that yurt in the days before the call? Investigators say Rebekah tried to run from the property multiple times. Richard described using a belt as punishment. Woods said she had CNA training, certified nursing assistant, and thought the girl would be fine, which contributed to a delay in calling 911. Deputies noted they had cell service in the area where she claimed she didn't. She acknowledged changing Rebekah's clothes before seeking help. Detectives challenged a story about a neighbor carrying the child back from a wash. Neither adult could name the neighbor. After the death, charges followed: first-degree murder for both adults and multiple counts of child abuse. As more evidence emerged, prosecutors filed an amended complaint adding 2 counts of molestation. In early September, a judge ruled there was enough evidence to bind the case over to trial in Apache County Superior Court. On September 8th, both defendants appeared and pleaded not guilty. The law presumes them innocent unless and until a jury says otherwise. At the time of the preliminary hearing, the final autopsy had not yet been filed. The defense emphasized that point. The court still found probable cause to proceed. Medical conclusions and legal guilt will be determined at trial. The method and motive are for a jury to weigh. Where does the case go from here? There is no sentencing date because there is no trial date yet. The court has bound the case over. Both caregivers have pleaded not guilty. What happens next will be decided in a courtroom, count by count, testimony by testimony.